thanks very much for your talk. So are there any questions from the audience to Leif?
What was the city of your second star on the right hand side? The left one was Carthago and the right hand side was
Arbela. Arbela?
What is it?
It was a city which, as far as I understand, where Alexander the Great was either about to take part in or won a battle.
Is it India? Is it already India?
No.
Cyprus.
It's what?
Erbil. Erbil.
Yeah.
Actual Cyprus then.
Okay. Is it true that most of the red points are along the coast? I mean, not only the Mediterranean, but also in India, the Indian north coast of the Arabic Sea. Is that correct?
Here, you mean, or
no? The other one where you had all the red points. What was it?
The high precision.
The high precision, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are overwhelming. A caveat here.
Yeah,
these do not include
yeah.
a very small number of points which lie along the traditional parallels. So, so those are not here, but that will give you probably another 20 throughout. But yes, no, there are none around.
No, they have got another map where you have the whole eastern part also colored in.
That could be the boundaries. Let's see if we can find the boundaries. These ones, maybe?
Anyhow.
See if I missed something. Stop me if I go too far.
I think it was the second one back. Was it?
That I just passed.
Yeah.
Or this one?
Is it correct that you had on the east, on the Indian north, you know, in the north of the Arabic Sea? Well, anyhow, I don't see it. No. You had a lot of points which indicate that they knew a lot of that area of.
Okay, so here we go. So I'll skip through. Let's see. Sorry for the timing. Just such an occasion I have prepared. Here we go. No. Yes. Okay. So this is India, or more specifically India before the Ganges, and here you can see that there is these tribal affiliations which work through in this direction, or again considerably more. So although there are not points to the nearest 12th of a degree, I think there are points to the nearest 6th of a degree within more or less this range over here. You don't get them over in this area. And it's not entirely clear. My hunch would be that there are actually two different sources that are being brought together. There's this part over here, and there's this part over here. They have a slightly different kind of feel to them, if that makes sense.
Does this information go back to Alexander's?
If I recall correctly, Ptolemy says. Okay, I'm going to risk getting this wrong, but if I recall correctly, Ptolemy says that people have travelled to India and have not only documented, much better documented than it has until recently, but also that they have made use of maps that the local people have. So that would again could be potentially very interesting as a source. I suspect, but I don't want to suggest this is as hard evidence because I don't have it, that Central Asian area is more likely to have an Alexandrian or relatively recent post-Alexandrian kind of history. But again, I don't have strong evidence for that, so that remains theorizing. What I would like saying, because it's not, I haven't been able to go chorographically as it were, or region by region. I think what would be very interesting would be to look at the kinds of toponyms and names which are being associated in those regions as opposed to the ones in the other areas. And that is work that I haven't done, so and needs to be done.
Let me start with two specific questions. Again, to the first slide with the precision coordinates. can you elucidate a little what you mean by that?
Yes, I can. This one here.
Because even a full degree would be a high precision problem.
Absolutely, of course. So you're exactly right. And when I said before, there are various things you can do to try and account for that. Yes, so what I have tried is to, fairly simple process, but so what we can certainly assume, let's taking the average of these, let's take the reds, which are latitudes. Okay, we have here a 1/12 of a degree, here, this can only be a 1/12 of a degree. This can only be a 12 degree, this can only be. This could be to the nearest degree, or precisely as you say, it could be to the nearest degree, it could be to the nearest half degree, it could be the nearest quarter degree, it could be the nearest sixth of a degree, and so on and so on. What you can do, however, is subtract in various ways, okay, between these things. So we know, so if this is the nearest 12th, the nearest sixth, we should be able to remove about a third of those on the assumption that those are things pegged to the nearest 12th of a degree that just happen to fall on the nearest sixth. Okay, but whatever's left, okay, are the proportions that are falling on the nearest sixth. And we can do the same trick again, okay, when we come to the 20th. 20 here and 40 where we're at the nearest third of a degree, and there we would expect some of these things to be the nearest 12th, some the nearest sixth, some the nearest third, okay, and so on we go. What happens though when you do that is it doesn't equal out. That was the first thing that had occurred to me. That's what's causing this.
But you might know my statistics from the star catalogue. There you have similar effects.
Right.
Which basically are due to the cause that you have different sources and different precisions.
Right.
So, and the first question here is whether you get this distribution of precisions by how many different sources of different accuracies.
Yes.
You do have the effect that the thirds, for example, are the maximum.
Yep.
Which seems to suggest that at least there is one treatment of data where the thirds are the lowest possible precision.
Yep.
And then you have other sources, and there it's not clear. The fifths, the tenths, and the 15ths. The tenths are smaller in number than the 15ths.
Yep.
Is peculiar, and it needs elucidation. But this might due also to the fact that the selection of data from the different sources is selective by itself. So in fact there is not much one can draw from this. But again, I would like to come back to your definition of precision. So the data which you plotted,
yes.
What is exactly the definition? Is it the fifths only? Is it the 15ths only?
It's the 12th, so 12th of a degree, so things which lie on 5 minutes, or 25 minutes, or 35 minutes, or 55 minutes. Because those ones are the only ones that we know. As you say, it might be that some of these are of that level of precision.
And when you take
the
distributions of the 15ths and 25ths and 45ths?
So I have done the same, and we could look at it later on if you want to see the distributions. Yes. I'd be more than happy to.
Very curious.
Yes, yes, be happy to.
The second one, the last statistics actually I don't buy.
Okay, yeah.
At least I would like to see the precise.
Again, I can show you the
because the number of bins are so small.
Right.
That any Hyphegesis test would make it compatible.
So you think it's not statistically significant?
Exactly.
Okay.
At least I would like to see the numbers.
I'd be very happy to show you the ones that they are. Yeah, no problem at all. I have a spreadsheet which is probably, but we can sit down on the table in a minute and I'll happily show you.
Yes. First of all, let me congratulate on your very stimulating paper. If I may sum it up unfavorably, of course. Your basic idea is that the framework is coming from Marinus and the content is coming from chorographic content.
Yeah? That would be my hypothesis.
Yeah, but I have trouble believing that because first of all, Marinus framework is a little bit different than Ptolemy's ones because we have this extension of 225 degrees and not 180 degrees.
Absolutely right.
Yes. And also for the north-south extension is different.
Yes.
Second, what kind of chorographic sources is Ptolemy citing in his introduction, as far as I know? No.
Okay, so both points I think are really good points. The first, I fully agree with you. I could not agree with you. Ptolemy explicitly and in various chapters in Book 1 talks about Marinos' framework and how he's going to change that framework. So he makes very specifically the case that it extends to 15-hour intervals and that is too far. And he compresses more or less the distance from the Euphrates all the way to Cattegara from, I'll get the maths wrong now, but that's the portion that he compresses. Things west of the Euphrates, he maintains the same distances. Okay, so he accepts Marinos' distance from the Isles of Blest on the one hand in terms of degrees through to the crossing of the Euphrates. Quite why he squeezes that, I think, is a really interesting question, and I don't have a good answer for it. I have some theories that don't feel quite comfortable to me, but that we could speculate about. He does the same thing also, as you say, for the southerly extension of the Ecumene, and again reduces that southerly extension. So you're absolutely right. When I say that he's using Marinos' framework, I do mean that he's doing that, making the corrections which he's quite explicitly makes, and I wouldn't dispute that for a moment. In terms of the chorographic sources, I think that's a really interesting question, and it's interesting for two reasons. So one is he talks about chorography and then he kind of poo-poos it. Is he going to use this stuff? Or is he just sort of euphemistically or elliptically referring to it when he talks about, when we go back and he says, I'm going to use the other map. He does say the more accurate maps, but then we need to think of, well, what are these more accurate maps to which he's referring? He's referring to something, there's no doubt about that. We can also presume that a lot of this stuff is going to be available, potentially at least, on porticos, as you know, that we have, again, written testimony to various mapped porticos, which showed the world either as a single image or potentially as a series of images. We don't know which. We do know that they did have complete global coverage, if you will. It seems to me, however, that one possible solution so if we look at region by region, exactly as you say, you won't get exactly that same distribution. You'll get a very similar kind of peaked distribution in each case. But for example, when we get to India, there will be gaps where the 12ths are, 5 and 25 and 35 and so on. And the same, you'll see similar kind of variations across the Ecumene. But to throw a theory out there, if you've got a map on a wall somewhere, systemically, based on the changes, the arrangements that you made with Marinos' grid or his framework, that you're relatively confident that things are approximately in the right place. So you're not building error upon error upon error, and I think that's what's crucial for Ptolemy. If he was just taking a bunch of chorographic maps with Agrippa's distances, for example, and he's just sticking them together, then you've got your first one, which is kind of a little bit wrong, but let's say it's a little bit too wide, and then the next one is too wide, and then systemically keeps kind of moving you along. But by taking stuff and pegging it to the framework, you have internal error, and we know that Ptolemy is full of internal error at the local level, but you maintain, systemically speaking, and it's the structural level, a relatively good approximation of where things are on the Earth, at least according to your hypotheses. So let's say you need to record that information. Well, one of the ways that you might do that is by taking a grid. Okay, so here is my painting on the wall. Okay. According to Marinos, I know that the beginning of that place, which is going to be over there, is at such and such hour interval, and the furthest extent is at the next hour interval, and the southerly one is at this parallel, and the northern one is at this parallel. Okay, that gives me a natural grid, which I can then record over the wall in some fashion or another. Okay, I can then mark off those things, but the granularity of that grid, the precision that's required to record things on that particular grid, is going to vary, because the painting of India is probably going to be the same size as the painting of Italy. Okay, that's fair enough. But the grid, the granularity of the grid that I paint over that, is going to have a very different nature. Okay, it's going to be further apart or closer together. And it might be that it's that recording process which is giving us this variation in terms of and I say precision in inverted commas. This is not true precision, but it's the ostensible and apparent precision because he's using finer granularities within the degree. I throw it as a potential hypothesis, a potential explanation. I don't have concrete evidence to demonstrate that it's demonstrably true.
I would like to add, because I think it's even more complicated or muddled. The name Marinus seems to suggest that there's one potential source for Ptolemy. But when one looks at the coordinates in detail, and I ask the question, so how many different sources do you, according to your analysis, suggest that you drew upon? You had this one slide where you had different colors of large regions coinciding with the maps, I think.
Yeah, coarsely speaking, yeah.
So, and your talk sounded as if you would suggest that the number of different sources you suggest coincides with different colors of these drawings.
No, I don't think.
I think it's flatly impossible.
Yes, sure.
So the number of sources behind these geographic mappings in general, I would estimate is about 100 different sources.
Right.
So therefore, to talk about Marinos as a compilator is somehow a fictitious talk. Let's forget about Marinos.
Yeah.
He has 100 sources, and he has to compile it, as he says, into a synthesis of the whole picture.
Right.
These 100 different sources might be different ways how to display geographical information. Your thesis that there are maps underlying, I simply don't believe it at all.
Okay.
There is no clue whatsoever that we have pre-Ptolemaic coordinate maps.
No, I don't think. Yeah.
So, and the other maps needs to be shown in which way he could exploit them. I don't think so. That we have Ptolemaic maps, mid-Nouveau is proven, I think, beyond doubt. Meanwhile, and in the discussion, it is quite clear.
Yeah.
So it's not a late or medieval invention to have Ptolemaic maps.
No.
They are classical, antique, but they begin with Ptolemy. So if we talk about possible sources for Ptolemy, we talk about non-map geographical information in the number of 100 as possible sources. So that's my general picture of how what the genesis of the coordinates is all about. Therefore, this picture is a little misleading about the possible sources. It might be informative about different sorts of treatments. So that might be a picture. The Mediterranean is a bit different treated than maybe Africa, maybe even England. There we have differences, but as you know, Spain is also quite different from the rest of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
That you draw that into one red map surprises me. But so when it comes in detail, somehow the whole picture disassembles and maps disappear.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great majority of what you said, I would fully agree with. Certainly, it is not, it's not my thesis that this is one single, definitely one single source. But I think when you look region by region, what you do see is that there are very close similarities between the maps. They are not the same. I don't say this for a moment. But this and these, the islands, again, slightly different kettle of fish. But there is a great deal more similarity in the treatment here, okay, in terms of these, where once we start to look at it, we get sketched.
Okay, but now you say, if I may, yes. Now you say quite revealing similarities in treatment. And
yes.
Maybe you are right, but that's not the same as similarity of source. I don't talk about sources there.
Oh, okay, if that's the, I mean, I think the approach that he has taken here, more or less across the board around the top here, seems to be about taking what I would suspect. I mean, these are clearly not based on road itineraries. These are clearly not based on travelers' tales and so on. This is somebody filling in a fairly brisk kind of a fashion, a series of places in space. Okay. Over here, there is a lot more nuance. In fact, interestingly, and I agree with you, I do think that there are Ptolemaic. I suspect Ptolemy did produce maps. They made the connection with them may or may not be a direct connection with them with the medieval ones. I don't know, but I think that he did. It's still very interesting that there is plenty in the chorographic maps which is in the text, but which is not in the chorographic maps. I also suspect that the chorographic maps are critical to Ptolemy's overall agenda. If you look at the structure of those, so again, there's been debate over the years about whether those regional maps were a kind of afterthought after having done the geographic stuff, whether they were kind of handy, useful kinds of things to finish up with. But if you look at the structure, if you look at the ordering with which he lists the places, so he starts up in the northwest and then moves down to the southeast, he groups them in regions which perfectly fit into the maps. And that suggests, so he will list all the regions of one map, followed by all the regions in the next map, followed by all the regions in the next map. That suggests that the ordering, that the maps were thought out before he began writing. And it could be argued, of course, well, maybe he wrote all the coordinates down, recorded the coordinates, and then reassembled them. He moved them around. But in each case, the borders that he's referring to, if the border has already been drawn, he'll say just simply use the border as was described in book so-and-so, chapter so-and-so. So that suggests that the entire production of the geography was conceived of as a unified whole. Those maps, those regional maps, I hesitate to call them chorographic, but were something that he was explicitly interested in at the beginning of the project. They weren't a useful byproduct of the things that he'd done beforehand. Which in and of itself suggests that the maps of some nature definitely existed. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to make a big claim that this is a map at all. But I would like to say that the nature of this kind of mapping, or that kind of source, would appear to be radically different from what's going on here. And that really interesting. I mean, it's strange that he goes literally from listing tribes to affiliating tribes, so from affiliating towns with tribes to affiliating towns with regions for no particularly clear reason, while still maintaining that micro-regionalism, which again I think is part of what's leading to that high precision. The precision is the need to be able to detail something in a map much more than it is actual real precision about the world surface, which he clearly doesn't have. I don't know if that's somewhat responded to your doubts, but
We can discuss another month.
yeah, no doubt.
Other questions before we switch to the line? If not, let's just thank our speaker again.